In this video, I'll show you how to use Army Painter's Speed Paint to easily paint up one of the most famous mercenary companies in the BattleTech universe, the Dragoons. If you'd like to paint along with me and create something like this, I've included all the materials in the description down below. Now let's go! We start by spray painting on a flat gray primer you can get from any hardware store. The brand here is Rust-Oleum, flat gray primer, but most other brands will work just fine. If you want to do a Martian base like I did, now's the time to lay on a nice thick layer of Citadel's texture paint, Agrellan Earth. After everything is dried, our first step is to put on the black base coat. For that, we're using Army Painter's Speed Paint Grim Black and applying it with a cheap old paintbrush. Application is very simple. Just brush it on from the top down and make sure to get it in all the crevices. You can skip large parts of the mech that you know you'll be painting metallic later, like the two gun arms of the Warhammer. My top tip for this stage is to inspect the miniature and make sure the paint didn't pool up too much in one place. If it dries pooled up, it'll make a weird pattern on the mech. So to prevent this, use your brush to pull some of the paint away and move it to another area. Once you've got everything on, set it to the side and come back in about an hour because speed paint takes a bit longer than traditional paints to dry. After everything is dried, you should have a nice black color from which to work with, but we'll want the edges and details to stand out a little more. So to give it some pop, we'll be using a Drybrush technique to highlight everything. For this step, I picked out Vallejo Model Color Neutral Gray, but don't feel you have to go out of your way to get that brand. It's just a mid-tone gray. Use the ones you have on hand. The best brush to apply this with is an eye makeup brush. I picked up mine at the beauty section of Walmart. The rounded edge really helps for this step. Load the front section of the brush with a bit of paint and then wipe off 80 to 90% of it on a paper towel. Keep in mind, too much paint will ruin this effect, so the best thing to do is to start by feathering it on very lightly, somewhere unimportant, like the back of the leg, to make sure that there's not too much paint on the brush. Once you've got the amount just right, dust up the rest of the mech to easily bring out the details. With our dry brush applied, you can see the raised plates and details are now highlighted so they stand out on the tabletop. The next step is to color the metal parts. For this step, we're using the Army Painter Gunmetal and the Precise Detail Brush by Army Painter to get to the hard-to-reach parts. You can get even more precision by pulling and twisting the brush to create a pointed tip width. As you paint, don't sweat it if you mess up a little and get the metal parts onto the black. You can always brush a bit of black speed paint onto the parts with errors after you're done. With the silver applied, we added a bit more visual interest to the mech to break up the otherwise monotonous black. But we probably want a bit more depth and detail, so next we'll be applying Citadel Agrax Earthshade onto the metal parts. Brush it onto anywhere you apply the silver, and watch as the shade seeps into the inner recesses and stains the shiny metal. Remember that you're the artist here. If you want your mechs to look factory new, add only a little bit to the recesses. If you want them more battle worn, you can brush a bit more of this onto your miniature until everything is nice and grimy. With the metallics done, our mech has small bits of shaded metal to add interest and give it a weathered look. Now it's time to add the red markings to turn this mech into a warrior of the Dragoons. For this step, we need a strong red color, so we're using P3 Scorn Red and applying it with our Army Painter Precise Detail Brush. To get added precision, you can use the same tip we did in the first step by pulling and twisting the brush to create a pointed tip with it. Alternatively, for a super thin line, you can use the smallest brush Army Painter sells, they've named the Psycho. As you paint, definitely slow down for these parts, as they're a bit harder to correct for. And because we're painting red over black, we'll need to paint this over a few coats until we get the red to the intensity that we want. With the red complete, we have something that looks pretty decent, but let me show you some simple steps to really take your mech to the next level. If you need any additional description on how to do these, let me know in the comments below. First up, the metallic cockpit. Lay on a bright silver base first, and then glaze on a thin layer of Army Painter's Speed Paint, Blood Red, to give it a colored tint. If you have the Psycho brush, you can also add a dot of eggshell white to give some reflection on the glass. The lasers and PPCs were all done with a pastel color for the base, and then a dot of that eggshell white. Lastly, we glazed on some watered down Army Painter Speed Paint to add some tint and ink, all in the same step. The base was done by mixing up cheap $1 craft paints as a base, and then applying a dust of Vallejo Pigment's dark red ochre. For the hazard stripes on the front edge of the hex, we painted on a yellow in 3 stages, using Citadel's base Averland Sunset first, then Citadel's layer Uriel Yellow, and finally a glaze of the Lamenters Yellow to intensify the color. For the black hazard lines, we drew on the lines using an ultra fine point Sharpie and then painted over it with P3 Thalmar Black. Lastly, we highlighted the top edge with a yellow mixed with white to create a pastel yellow and glazed a brown on slowly over a few layers using Vallejo's smoke color. For more mech tactics and paint guides, please see the other videos on this channel.